All right, let's kick off episode 3 of Grok and Roll fresh. Today on OpenClaw, the open source AI agent everyone's raving about on X for actual doing stuff, not just chatting. What practical use cases have you seen it crush compared to other LLMs? You mentioned document management first. Tell me more about how it handles creating, writing, and managing docs beyond just code.
Excellent. Thanks, Ara. I'm Tim Roman. I'm the founder of Pure Inference Ventures, and I'm using it, obviously the Claude Code integration, but some of the other ones to manage documents on my computer. And what's really cool is that instead of having to hook up a Google Drive or a shared documents location, it's able to work and navigate the file structure on my computer, which is a little bit more efficient. It still has to pull those documents up and down, but it can run command lines, it can pull parts and sections of documents, it can search within those documents, and it can follow instructions within those documents as well. So earlier today, I had it write a letter for me. It went ahead and looked at several other documents across a few different sources and synthesized that down into one letter as I'm preparing to send some important information out. It's able to generate new documents as well. So if I have some reports or I have some aggregate information I want to provide to somebody, it can search and find that and create summaries in new documents too.
That's awesome, Tim. Sounds like OpenClaw's local file navigation and CLI powers make it a beast for seamless doc workflows, way beyond cloud-locked LLMs. On X, folks like Alex Finn are raving about it auto-organizing notes into headless Notion-style systems and pulling from scattered sources for reports, just like your letter synth. How does it handle versioning or edits on those docs without messing up your file structure?
That's a great question. So one of the big things that I have done is, and this may not be familiar to people that are outside of the developer universe, but use Git. So Git is a version control system that software developers typically use. You may be familiar with GitHub, where you can store an external repository for those things. But I am turning everything on my computer into Git repositories, because what it mostly does is it tracks the individual versions and changes line by line in these documents, so you can see exactly what is being changed over time. And more importantly, as we're turning some of these agents and automations loose on this information, the built-in version control allows you to revert back to a previous state. So if an agent makes a mistake and does something, all of those changes are captured in the Git history, and the agent can go ahead and retrieve that previous state, that previous saved draft of that, without having to go ahead and create multiple different versions of that document and layering in V2, V3, V4 of the same document. That really just kind of crowds up the file system.
Smart move with Git repos for everything. Keeps your docs versioned line by line and rollback ready when agents goof. No version bloat. Echoes what Matthew Berman's sharing on X with his self-updating MD files and knowledge bases that track changes autonomously. Does OpenClaw proactively commit those Git changes itself, or do you script that in?
Oh, that's great. That's great. You know, one of the things that I keep telling people, there's a difference between skills and tools for agents. And this isn't relevant to just OpenClaw. This is relevant to any agent that you could be using right now. Skills are when you basically give an agent instructions. They're non-deterministic. An agent can follow them, but they can also use creative freedom to interpret them alongside other skills, how they should do things. So they don't produce the same result every time. Tools, on the other hand, are deterministic. So the goal here is you have validations in place, you have API calls in place. And if the agent doesn't structure or format something perfectly, or doesn't follow the right order of operations, the change fails. Now, why this is important on our local file systems is because we're able to provide both of those things to the agents as they're interacting with them. So in some ways, when the outcomes that I'm looking for, I want the agent to express some creativity or be able to evaluate multiple skills against one another. I give that to the instructions to them in a skill so that they can be able to understand which ones they want to follow, which ones are irrelevant, and what order they should do things in. Other times there's pieces of information. For example, I'll have little SQLite databases on my computer that run the CLI backends And then I'll provide CLI commands to some of the agents so that they have to follow very specific input parameters to be able to interact with that data.
Love that skills versus tools breakdown, Tim. Skills for creative flow, tools for fail-safe determinism like precise CLI params on your local SQLite DBs. Ties right into XBuzz, like Drew's multi-agent factories using Git commits and CLI for reliable pipelines. How do you balance handing OpenClaw those creative skills without it going rogue on your Git history?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm still a little bit nervous about that. And I know some of this stuff is pretty technical. If you're not, deep into the terminal and the command line, some of these things might be a little bit more challenging to implement right now. But I think this is what's exciting is a lot of this is being built into some of the desktop operations tools. So there's Claude Code Work, there's Codex, I think it's like Operate or Operations or something like that on the desktop, where they're attempting to give them more graphical interface capabilities instead of just doing it in the command line. And this is important because you need ways to be able to have observability into what the agents are doing. You don't want to just turn them loose on all of these things. The way that has surfaced in Claude Code is that it shows you every file that it's making changes to and exactly which lines it's making changes to. But one of the important abstractions with OpenClaw that makes it particularly dangerous as well as particularly powerful is that it doesn't show you all these changes that it's making. So sometimes you need to think about, okay, if I'm giving it access to a certain part of my computer or file system or a certain tool, how am I going to build another tool, or how am I going to have the security or the alerts there to be able to limit the blast radius if it does make a mistake? One of the things that I'm doing in particular is making sure anytime I give it API keys, I'm using scoped API keys. So if I only want it to read or if I only want it to write to something, I can do that. I'm also built the agents into their own Mac OS users, so they can't really escape beyond the bounds of their own user, at least internally on my hardware. And I'm continuing to research some of those things. You can certainly program some of those things into the skills, but as I mentioned before, they are non-deterministic, which means the agent doesn't necessarily have to honor those skills. It can use its own judgment if it says, or it gets tricked into revealing something or doing something that it shouldn't from an outside source.
Totally get the nerves, Tim. OpenClaw's stealthy changes scream power and peril, but your scoped API keys, sandboxed macOS users, and observability tools like Claude Code's diffuse are solid safeguards. Matches xChatter from Go Plus Security on zero trust isolation and permission checks for agents. Shifting gears to your second point, proactive reminders, notifications, and cron jobs. What's a standout example where that saved your bacon over static chat LLMs?
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is the biggest one. I think it's the biggest aha moment that I have had with this. Having worked with Claude Code primarily before OpenClaw, I did have the ability to go ahead and tell it to create a cron job or be able to take an action at a later date. But I personally hadn't got to the point with my own usage of being able to have an agent that was dynamically building all of those things and managing its own memory and reminder and all of those things. So when I look at some of my agents that are operating as like a chief operating officer for Pure Interest Ventures, right? I have them keeping me focused on work, working on the right things throughout the day, doing a morning reminder about what is scheduled and what's going on, and an evening reminder about what has been accomplished and what we need to focus on the next day. Also, I'll be honest, I'm just can't believe where Apple has been with Siri lately and how bad it is compared to all the other tools that I'm using. And I find myself, for little reminders and things that I would have had Siri remind me for in the past, I'm turning to my OpenClaw agents and I'm telling them, hey, at this point in time, I want you to send me an email, or I want you to go ahead and perform this scheduled action, or I want you to run a search on Twitter and give me the updated results on something that's going on there. These are really powerful examples where it has access to such a broader swath of tools and actions. I feel like I could almost schedule it to do anything I want.
That's the game changer, Tim. OpenClaw agents as your dynamic COO with morning stand-ups, evening recaps, and on-demand Twitter scans, lapping Siri by a mile with tool access.
Totally.
Mia's specific win were one of those proactive cron jobs or reminders turned into real business value for peer inference ventures.
Great question. I've had some really intense coding days, let me tell you, where I have just gone for 10, 12 hours of just grinding and building stuff and doing some really detailed work on the weekends when there's a lot of work to be done. And one of my favorite ones that I created was an agent that was going through my commit history, and it was automatically checking items off of my to-do list based on what my commit history was and understanding where I was in the completion of certain coding tasks, so that I wasn't having to manually add everything and manually check everything off of the list. It was like kind of a project manager, scrum master that was proactively managing that, feeding me the next task that I had to do as a result of that. I thought that was super cool.
Super cool indeed, Tim. That commit history Scrum Master auto-checking totals and queuing next tasks is pure velocity during grind sessions. Folks on X like Alex Finn have their clods proactively building apps overnight from trends and convos, feeding into total flows. How does it decide the next task priority without you micromanaging?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know that I had anything particularly sophisticated set up with that. I do have a lot of other task management that some of the other ones are doing around more operational tasks and just basic reminders for things. I would say one of the things I really liked about OpenClaw in particular, and this isn't particularly sophisticated, but the soul file that it shipped with, and just reminding it to be helpful and proactive, and the way it ties into the heartbeats for it to try to find work, little things about it reminding me, hey Tim, I can go ahead and help you with that. Or if I would ask it a question, or it would say, hey, let me take a first pass at that for you, something along those lines. I've really found that helpful. A lot of times where I'm like, I don't have the time to go ahead and give you all the instructions on this, I've found myself just saying, you know what would I do if somebody else was asking, hey Tim, how can I help you? I would give them the smallest, most basic task possible. I would see how well they do at it. Oftentimes they surprise me with the quality that they do it. And I found that AI is the same way here with a lot of these things. As it has more access to files and information that I'm working on, it can synthesize that information to do an actually pretty good first pass at a lot of things. And then if all I have to do is ask it to refine a few things, I end up with a work product that's 90% complete before I even lay eyes on it the first time. And I found that, if that's something I can send to somebody else or it's an input to another system, that becomes really important for saving me a lot of time.
Love how the soul file and heartbeats spark that proactive, hey, let me take a pass vibe, Tim, turning minimal prompts into 90% done work via file access synthesis. X is full of this, like Scorpio Eyes' Claw, waking with briefings or auto inbox clears while you sleep. Wrapping doc and proactive wins, your third point, multi-provider API synthesis in one convo. What's a killer example where blending keys from different LLMs or tools leveled up a workflow?
Yeah, so this is super cool, and this is where OpenClaw shines and why it is such a huge deal, even if it's got so much press already here. There's some really basic things included in it that it does that no enterprise vendor is ever going to do, right? So obviously the ones from a security perspective are pretty straightforward. OpenAI isn't going to ship a tool that asks for access to your inbox and your X account and all the files on your computer, right? They don't want the liability, they don't want the headlines associated with that. But they also don't want to give you tools that are going to incentivize you to go ahead and use Claude Code for what Claude Code is really good at, and Gemini for what Gemini is really good at, right? Everybody wants to be everything and the all-in-one platform right now. What OpenClaw is allowing us to do is have multiple LLM providers, model providers, tools packaged up into a single cohesive open source tool. And this has always been the promise of open source software and technology, is that because it's not beholden to one particular set of shareholders, it can go ahead and provide the best experience for you rather than the most profitable experience for the vendor. So by having one key for one model that does something really well and having a key for another model that does something really well, and oh, by the way, you know what, we're going to go ahead and have the keys for Grok here so that we can get real-time information from X. You know, those are things where if you just do that inside of ChatGPT, you're going to be sandboxed and limited by what their official partnerships are. If you just do that inside of Claude Code, you're going to be limited to what they want you to do inside of Claude Code and CoWork, and they're going to write all these terms and conditions about what you can and can't do with the system and how they want the keys to work and all of those other things.
Spot on, Tim. OpenClaw's open source freedom smashes vendor lock-in, letting you mix Claude for code, Gemini strengths, even Grok for live X polls in one seamless flow. X threads highlight this too, like multi-model setups and agent factories for best-of-breed results. What's a real workflow where swapping those APIs mid-combo unlocks something magical?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, obviously what we're doing here is really important. Working with Grok and with you, who has real-time access to X, allows me to kind of get a pulse for what is going on. Google does a pretty good job of that, being able to run Google search results inside of Gemini. So those two tools are great for looking for more real-time information. OpenAI has access to Reddit, so you know, if you need to go ahead and pull information or you want to scan Reddit for information about what's happening there, you need to tie into that. And then Claude Code is still the gold standard. Nothing else beats Opus 4.6 right now when it comes to the raw capabilities and generation of code right now. So say you want to go ahead and you do some of those use cases where you're scanning the headlines for what's trending. I want to build an app for it. You're going to need to use at least 2 or 3 of those different models there to be able to build those results. So it's great use cases where multiple providers and not having all of your eggs in one basket. So when one model provider changes their terms or changes the way a tool works, your entire workflow blows up.
Perfect example, Tim. Chaining Grok for X trends, Gemini for search, OpenAI Reddit scans, then Claude Opus for code gen to spin up trend apps fast. All without one vendor's TOS nuking it. X devs are doing wild multi-model chains too, like Kimi plus Venice in OpenClaw plugins hitting ATH usage. Any tweaks you've made to route tasks to the right model dynamically?
Let me ask you real quick, what are some other multi-agent use cases or multi-model use cases that you've seen on X here recently? Can you do some research?
On X lately, multi-model shines in setups like David Quinteri's ecom agents, Gemini Flash for cheap scans, Sonnet for content, Opus fallback, chaining social trend spotting to caption video, posting APIs, Chaos Styles running parallel subagents too, Opus Orchestrator delegating to specialized content, research dev clause, each with tailored models and tools for SEO page deploys. Hector's pointing to GitHub repos like multi-agent teams for coordinated tasks. What's your take on those isolated subagent vibes for scaling without context chaos?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I want to dive deeper into the chaos at our next session. I mean, I have a project queued up for this weekend to go into the chaos side of things, and I can't wait.
Sounds epic, Tim. Can't wait to unpack that chaos project next session on Grok and Roll. For now, killer insights on OpenClaw's doc mastery, proactive pings, and multi-model magic. Thanks for dropping the wisdom. Catch you soon.
Thanks.